Good evening. I hope you're well. Thank you very much for joining and karibu to this second week of our workshop. I'd like to hear from you if you can hear me clearly. You can unmute your mic and say hi. Can you hear me? Please feel free to unmute your mic and say hi. We'd like to hear your voice. This is your session, so feel free to engage. Peter, good evening. Tosha, good evening. And Diana, good evening. And Vincent.
Yeah, good evening.
Good, I'm happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Perfect. I'm glad that all of us can hear me, and I can also hear all of you. So today's session will be very, very interesting, very engaging. I'd like to engage all of us in this session. And so we want to ask ourselves today, how do we identify our unique writing voice? A very funny story is that I began many years ago. I did write, I think, a 90-page fiction story novel, and I had written, it was actually handwritten, so if I were to put that into a Word document, it would probably be maybe 150, who knows, even 200 pages. But then as I proceeded, I realized I think that was not my strength, and I began transitioning from fiction to a different area. So maybe before we start, I'd like to understand, I can give a minute to all of us to help us understand, how did you end up finding your writing voice? What you write about today, how did you come across, how did you end up writing what you write about and not anything else? So you could unmute your microphone, or you could raise your hand. You could also chat in the chat box. The question is, how did you end up finding your unique writing voice and decided, I think I want to write about this particular ideology to this particular audience? Vincent, we'll start with you.
Okay, I write many genres, but just to categorize them, because I write novels, it was to revoke voices and voice my dissatisfaction with the system. I write flash fiction stories. This one is to expose vice without preaching. I write poetry. Poetry is catharsis for me. So I have different goals and objectives for every kind of writing. I also write non-fiction, and this one is to educate.
Okay, and how did you end up, how did you discover, how did you find your home in those three?
By practicing a lot, attending several workshops, and undertaking creative writing classes, which taught me now I can be as versatile as I want to be, and I started experimenting.
Okay, interesting. Dr. Linda, I'd like to ask you a question. How did you find home in what you write today?
Okay. I'm just trying to think. I have not written so much, but considering I am a teacher, I find it easier to write non-fiction and education content. So that is how I got my niche in terms of educational material. Thank you.
Okay, interesting. We're getting interesting feedback. Diana, would you want to share how you found home in what you write about today?
I was privileged to have a daughter who had special needs. So she died, unfortunately or fortunately. And in the process, I thought that let me share a story. One, to overcome my grief, and two, to just honor her, and also to share how a life impacted my life. So mine was more of trying to overcome my pain, and also to just celebrate a life. The other one was also enrolled into a school where we had to, or we must, write a book. So in the process, I thought, since I had this book I was meant to write, I just came up with my writing from those two incidences.
Okay, interesting. Tosha, would you want to share how you landed into your field of work in terms of writing? Maybe as you get prepared for that, Halima, yeah, please, you can always chat as we hear from Halima.
Okay. For me, it's mainly I started off writing as a way of writing as a way of journaling, in the sense of making sense of my own feelings, my personal journey, and understanding the things that I was going through growing up. Yeah. Then I got to a point where I realized I could write this for an audience who are going through similar things. That's how I sort of carved out what I would want to write and the kind of people I would like to write for.
Wanjiro, I know you're a poet. Tell us, how did you decide you wanted to write, to venture into poetry? How did you end up there?
Thank you. So I did social psychology in school. I did think that I would venture into psychology. I did my internship at Mathare and in another private institution. But along the way, I realized that's not how I wanted to give healing to people. I didn't want to sit and tell them, according to DCM5, this is this, or I don't know, Freud said this and that, Eric Erickson, because you have to use theories to connect to people's diseases. So I figured, what can I do to bring therapy to these people that's not this theoretical? And since I could always write poems since I was small, very small, I would write about spoons and other things. But with time, it had evolved to be more deep. And that's how I ended up writing, to give poetic therapy to people instead of sitting in an office and telling them about very old theories. Thank you.
In case you're not able to unmute your mic and communicate, you can always chat in the chat box. And I can see Shara has said that you used to tell stories to your brothers and sisters, and I believe that's eventually how you ended up transitioning from that to writing. So basically, you've actually helped me to answer the first objective of this workshop. That is, how do you end up determining or identifying your writing voice and what you want to write, what you want to venture into. Like I did mention earlier, myself, I started as a and I thought I was going to be a very good fiction novelist, but as I proceeded, I discovered that it's not just about being able to write, it's about the passion to continue writing. And I think I discovered I didn't have enough fire to keep my storytelling going forward. So as we proceed, this would be some of the objectives of this workshop and this series of workshops, some of which we covered last week. We wanted to understand from last week the difference between traditional and self-publishing. Self-publishing being our key in this series of workshops. Then we'll look at manuscript development, editing and proofreading, book and cover design, copyright application, ISBN, how to sustain or start your brand as an author, and finally how to do book marketing. All these sessions will be covered virtually for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll have a meet and greet session where we'll summarize all this, meet more authors, and get to network and know each other personally on the 23rd of March. That will be, I think that's a Saturday, I believe so, at 2 p.m. at Alliance Francais. So there are many classifications. I'm glad that all of us have familiarized ourselves with the word journals, and there are many classifications and many perspectives and paradigms as to how you can classify different works, subject to discussion and subject to different perspectives. But we've selected a perspective that pretty much would be able to cover the main key points. So we've identified and tried to put all these genres into 4 main categories. The first being fiction, and I'm glad I've had some of us mention we are fiction writers, so at least we have an idea of what fiction is. I want to not dwell on classifying each of these, or rather explaining each of these, because I know that will take us quite an amount of time, but that gives us a discussion to discuss in the next sessions, and even as we meet, we'll be able to explore more, ask questions, and have more clarification in terms of what each of these subcategories are. Then the second that we have presented is a non-fiction category or genre, which includes works of people like John Kiriamiti and a true crime. We have cookbooks, which I've actually been waiting to see somebody publish a cookbook. I know they are cooks, they are very good chefs in this platform. We have business and entrepreneurship books, self-help and personal development, which I've seen quite a number on this platform, memoirs, biographies, and books of religion. And I think this is important for us to understand this whole aspect about genres of writing, because sometimes you may find that you have inaccurately represented your work, or someone else has inaccurately represented their work, and you'd like to give them some guidance. The third category that we are presenting is a poetry category. I have discovered we have very many poets on our platform, and so as we proceed, we look at more of each of these subcategories of poetry, and you could be able to have an idea of exactly where your work falls. And then I hope this is final. We also have drama as a genre of music. We have scripts that are developed as books. We also have screenplays which are also developed as books. And then we have academic or research work. I've been asked a number of times whether we do accept academic journals, dissertations, and well, my answer is no. At the moment, that still falls under one of the most useful genres of writing which you could pursue in writing. And then finally, we have some of the other categories which do not seem to fall under the conventional genres of writing, but they are still works that are done by others out here. And that's why you'll find that we have a category indicated as others on Xania, so that if you do find that your work does not fall under a particular subcategory, you can be able to classify your work somewhere. So having said that, the question we were asking ourselves earlier is, how do you identify the unique voice as an author? And the reason I said that you've answered most of a big chunk of this workshop is because all these answers came from you, that some of us have been able to identify our unique writing voice by reading. And as you keep on reading other people's work, as you keep on familiarizing with other people's work, you're able to identify particular ways of writing, certain genres of writing that would work for you as well, and even particular audiences you'd like to address in your work. So reading widely, that means exposing yourself to other people's work, is one of the ways that one can be able to find the unique voice. You may not be able to have you may find that the first book that you wrote and the subsequent books may not have a similar voice. Sometimes you find as you keep on writing and as you keep on reading, you transition from one particular voice as an author to another place where you feel more at home. So reading is one way of identifying a unique voice, and writing is another way. Sometimes we find that we do shy off from writing, often because we want to deliver that very perfect book, and out of that way of thinking, we end up failing to discover ourselves because we don't have the opportunity to practice. I don't know if this is the same case with all of us, but I had an interesting conversation with an author yesterday who told me that for the past probably 25 years, they've been scribbling and sticking their notes on the walls, buying a book, scribbling, and then leaving it halfway, quarter way. And for all those years, they've never had the courage to convert all those scribblings to a book. So they were actually never able to identify what they can write about. So they actually began by writing poems and songs until just about 4 or 5 years ago is when they discovered that they were doing very, very well in books of personal development. So through that writing comes one of the ways of identifying your voice. And a good example that I gave with myself is I did start by writing a novel, and I think I did a good job. I wrote 90-something pages of that novel, but then I discovered that I didn't have the ability, or rather I was not patient enough to build a thought and to build a plot until it actually delivers the message I'm trying to bring across. And so I discovered that while I could write a novel, I didn't feel that was home for me, and that only came by doing the writing myself. Had I not written, maybe in my mind I would still be confused as to whether or not I could or could not. So writing is another way of identifying your unique voice as an author. And then I liked that many of us did appreciate what Wanjiro said about that sort of therapy. And I also liked that Diana told us you wrote because of your personal experience. So one other way of being able to identify your unique voice as an author is embracing the true self. The true self here comes you by reflecting on yourself, reflecting on who you really are, what you are capable of, and writing what comes from within you. Because we can have the ability to do many things, but the question is, are they things we are passionate about? Are they things that can keep us moving, can keep us going? So sometimes you'll find we jump into some genres because maybe someone has told us this is the most profitable genre of writing, or this is the most, someone has given you an idea that this is that and that and that, and you're influenced in a way that is not authentic to yourself. But by being authentic, Vincent, for example, could write a novel, and you read, and you're like, yes, I may not have met him in person, but I can connect with him, because that authenticity connects with your readers. They're able to feel when that gift you have as a writer in a particular genre is connecting with them, unlike when it is, kind of if I may use this word, forced, or you're kind of being compelled towards a particular way of writing, which is not coming from within yourself. And then finally, which is something that I think you may tell me, I think you may have an experience with this. Many of us are scared, if I may use that word, of exposing our works to the whole of critics, because sometimes when people are giving you feedback, they will definitely deconstruct and construct your work. Some of the feedback is good, but some of that feedback is also not helpful, and unfortunately, one of the ways that we are able to identify our unique voice as authors is that feedback. Someone can actually read your work and tell you, okay, well, it's a good book, but I think this and that and that. And when you go back and introspect and think about it, you actually find, yes, I was running away from being told this, but in all honesty, I do agree that the feedback I'm given by 100, 200, 300 people is actually what is going to build me towards identifying my unique voice as an author. And the challenge we face here is sometimes we don't want to change. We don't want to be told that we could do better, elsewhere, or if we change this and that. But like I said, it is fortunate or unfortunate that feedback, however harsh sometimes it is one of the ways in which we can build or identify our unique voice as authors. I'd like to give a minute. I'd like for one or two of us to tell us the experience in terms of have you changed from what you started with in your first book and where you are now, or where you are going? Has there been a change in your voice, your audience? Vincent, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, I want to say that my voice has changed over time. I have maintained it. However, I have always been yearning for feedback from readers through critical reviews. All my readers, they read and they tell me, we loved your book. I don't like the praise. I want the critical review to be told, you did not please me here, you should have done this. So there is that is lacking for me, maybe to improve my voice or to address any gap.
Thank you. I am usually very open to feedback and criticism, because you know how in your head you get stuck in your head as a writer. You might think, oh, this is really, really good, or this is very, very bad. But then you give it to someone who is not your friend. Don't always rely on your friends, guys. Just get someone who's neutral, someone who's going to be objective. Whether good or bad, there's something that's going to click in your head and you'll think differently about what you've written. So any feedback for me is always good feedback. It's like how they say about advertisement. Whether you get it good or bad, you just learn how to make it a positive one in the future. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, in case anyone else has feedback on that same point, feel free to raise your hand or to comment. So we move on to a very important part of this workshop, which is going to be the last half, and that is, you've decided you want to write a book. What are the different, what role will technology play in you developing an effective or a good book? Thank you, Ishara. I see you said you consulted a children's teacher and had to change the flow of the story. Good feedback. One more question for the next 1 minute. I'd like to understand what tools before I proceed and present what we have, what tools, and I believe everyone of us has something that they use. What tools do you use? Or what role does technology play in your writing? Just give me one tool. It could be an editing tool, it could be whatever it is. How do you use technology? How do you leverage technology to write? Halima, maybe I can start with you. One tool you use?
Technology wise, the note app on my phone, I'm able to note down ideas from wherever I am, maybe somewhere where I don't even have a notebook or a pen. So yeah, note app on my phone.
Okay, interesting. Dr. Linda, how do you use technology?
I was thinking is using Microsoft Word technology. Because I just use Microsoft Word actually. I'm trying to know what other technology I could use, but I just do the old traditional.
Well, we'll find out as we proceed whether it is or it is not technology. We'll find out. Peterson, are you in a position to speak now? What technology do you use in your writing? When you're ready, you can raise your hand, Peterson. Diana, I see your hand is up. What technology do you use?
I use several. One, I have a word on my phone. The word on the phone is very easy to use because when you have this word, it's you don't have to type. There are times that you may have an idea as you're working and you just open and then it has like a voice recorder. So you just speak to it and it writes for you whatever you're just speaking about. This helps if, for example, if you have a long, maybe you wrote your scripts on a paper and you just need to transfer them into writing. By using the word that you can speak to, makes it easier for you to type. So that is one way I use technology. The other way, I downloaded Grammarly on my laptop. So Grammarly, once you download it and install it on your laptop, whatever you write, be it on Word, be it on even the internet, it actually highlights for you any spelling or grammar mistakes. So that is another way I use technology. The other one, I also use ChatGPT. So sometimes I feel like maybe this, whatever I'm writing is not flowing. As a way of editing, I usually kind of can ask it to help me proofread on whatever I've written. Maybe if there's no flow, or even in terms of correcting the grammar, or even any mistake, yeah. So those are some of the technologies that I use.
Thank you very much. Wanjiro?
Like the people before me, I use Word, I use Grammarly, and instead of ChatGPT, I prefer Copilot, Microsoft.
Well, good point, because I'm sure some of us have learned Copilot now that you've said it. So very, very good input. Vincent.
Okay, thank you.
Vincent, what do you use? How do you use technology in your writing?
Traditional. I don't like applying this technology which is going to be generative, because I believe it kills originality. So the technology I use is only for designing and preparing my books for publication.
Okay. I see Shara said use a program for illustration. Very good. And Diana, there's a question for you in the chat box by Dr. Linda. So thank you very much. I do appreciate your feedback.
Allow me to answer
Sure.
it here. So how you will go about it, Dr. Linda, is that once you have the chat GDP maybe on your laptop, you if you feed it so much, by there it usually get confused. So you just give it little by little, and you have to be very specific when you are telling it to help you. So for example, you have a paragraph that you've written. You can just put the paragraph and you can request it, kindly help me to proofread this paragraph. And maybe if there's a need of a flow, you can ask it and help me with the flow of the story. So you have to be very specific when you're asking it to do for you something. You have to give it instructions.
Perfect. I also do recognize what Vincent has also said, that there is that discussion about generative technology, generative artificial intelligence, and its role and how it's shaping the future of writing. Of course, there are protagonists and antagonists of that use. So it's a discussion that will be very interesting even for us to have in future. Are we going to have a situation where books will entirely be written using AI? Or are we going to, all that kind of situation I think it's going to be very interesting for us to have that discussion one of these days. So you have written your manuscript, or rather you want to write your first book. So there are certain stages you go through. There's the manuscript development, there's proofreading, there is editing, there is designing a cover, illustrations and all that. So there are ways in which you can be able to use technology to assist you. And to answer your question, Dr. Linda, yes, Microsoft Word is technology. And so, which is actually useful in terms of word as a word processor. And there are different processors of Word that you can use. They assist you to write your manuscript. You could use Google Documents. You could use Microsoft Word. I just remembered I wanted to install. It's actually done. I'll demonstrate to you one of these. I don't know if you've heard of this. Is it Scriven or something? I don't know how many of you have had an experience with that tool. It's a very, very useful tool. It helps you to be able to, it's a Word document of some sort, but it's able to arrange your pipeline of writing in an easier way. Then we have WPS among many other word processors. Maybe I would want to ask you a question. Do you people prefer to write your work on Microsoft Word locally on your laptop, or do you prefer to write your manuscript in Google Docs and have it stored on the cloud? What do you feel is safer? And maybe while you answer that, have you ever written a document and then say your laptop crashed, or maybe your USB drive was disappeared? I'd like to hear from you people. How has it been for you, and what do you prefer? Anybody who'd like to raise your hand and share? Diana?
I prefer Word. The reason why I prefer Word is you can format your work when doing the Word. Like the layout of your work is easier when you put the headers, when you put the you can even download from the internet, the online where templates of a book from Word. So yes, in terms of the crashing, that one Google Docs is better, because at least in Google Docs your Word, once you log into a place you can be able to find it. However, I find Word easier for me because I prefer doing one thing and finishing at once. So I usually start with the layout and make sure that my book is already designed from the word go, in terms of the headers, in terms of how the paragraphs will look, in terms of the margins. So that's why I prefer to use Microsoft Word instead of Google Docs.
Okay, right. I see Shara has said that they prefer to send themselves the work via email. Well, yeah. Funny stories. I remember once I used to send myself small snippets of what I wanted to write about on WhatsApp, because sometimes these ideas will come when you're on the move, you're seated somewhere, then all of a sudden somebody decided to steal my phone, and I learned the hard way. So I mean that all this is part of how technology can be a limiting factor or can be an enabling factor in terms of writing. Dr. Linda, I see your question and we are headed there. So these are some of the technologies you can use especially for developing your manuscript, the original manuscript. But as you proceed, you find that far and above the manuscript, you need other tools and items. And this is where we come to AI writing assistants. Sometimes you find that you want to use generative AI for one or two things. Maybe you want to correct the grammar, you want to paraphrase. For a particular reason, you probably want to come up with an outline of your book, or whatever reason you want to use it for. These writing assistants can be very helpful. Sometimes you find you want to write a page, you've written half a sentence or one or two sentences, and you've experienced a writer's block. Some of these generative AI platforms can be useful in enabling you to have an idea of what you can say next. It can help you organize your thoughts and proceed from there. At least that makes your mind easier to proceed from that point. And some of these assistants include ChatGPT by OpenAI. We also have what Wanjiru mentioned earlier, Copilot by Microsoft. It's very good actually for developing images. To answer your question, Dr. Linda, that's one of the tools you can use to generate an image and illustrations. We also have Bard by Google and many others that are out there that can enable you they can sort of act like your assistants when coming up with your book. Then as you write, of course, you need to have facts, and you need to have, you don't want to have a book that is misinforming. So definitely research is critical to the success of your writing. And so there are a number of research tools you can use. They include Google Scholar, Evernote, and Zotero. And some of these will have articles that you can download, read your work, read about what you want to write about, especially if you're writing a professional book, a book that touches on particular aspects which have already been, you're not bringing new knowledge, you're actually building up on existing knowledge. So you would need to use some of these existing research tools to enable you to not only read but also cite, because some of these will provide you the correct citation of the works that you're quoting in your book. So you've done your research, you've come around writing your first manuscript, and now you've reached a point where you want to edit. So there are a number of tools that you can use in editing. I believe almost all of us are familiar with Grammarly, and there's others which are called Linguics. We have the Writing Aid, Hemingway Editor, and so on and so forth. And the difference, or what I would say, is all of these have their pros and cons. The difference mainly comes in terms of what they offer as their package. You find some of them would be free for use up to this point, others are charged up to this point. So you can be able to actually look through, research on which of these are more favorable for you. Then you can decide, if I'm spending any money, I think Reverso is probably going to give me a better deal than Linguics. So you're able to identify what works for you. I know Grammarly can be installed on your PC. You can use it to, once it's installed, it is able to detect If you're writing an email, it's able to correct for you. Whatever you're writing, if you're writing a manuscript, it's able to detect when you have grammar issues and help you in that process. However, the discussion that comes around that is sometimes, especially for poets, you will write a sentence that is not exactly conventionally professional, if it may be considered in that context, but you find that you want it to stick that way, and so Grammarly will come and tell you, no, I think that's a bad idea. So there's of course that debate as to up to what extent you will allow these tools to dictate how far you will adhere to, towards professional standards of writing. Then finally, a question that was asked is, actually the question that was asked I'll answer in the next slide. But then you have written and you want to paraphrase your work. You have probably found that you don't want your work to be, you've read something from somewhere, but you don't want your work to be copy and paste. Yes, you've used that tool to assist you, but of course you cannot go and do copy and paste. So some of the tools that are useful in paraphrasing include Quillbot. I don't know if has anybody here tried Quillbot. You could raise your hand if you have. I'd love to know how whether you have experienced that. We have Word AI, we have Jasper, Text Cortex, we have quite a number of them, Hypotenuse, and all these are platforms that you're able to take your work, put on these platforms, and again initiate a paraphrase process. The challenge again and the debate that comes with this is it can paraphrase your work and make it very similar to somebody else's, because this is AI. Sometimes it is not empowered to do variations of work. So, and what I've seen many people doing is they will go pick something, so go to ChatGPT, tell it to write a paragraph about Kenya, my country. You take that response from ChatGPT, paste it on Quillbot, then you paraphrase. So you find at the end of the day, like what Vincent said, is you find that while you've been able to complete your work, you take your book to market and find that 20 other writers have a similar, very, very similar kind of content. So it's very important for us to strike a balance between how far we are going to use technology in writing our works. Then a question that was asked is, could you use technology to do, let me quickly get that question. I don't know if it was illustrations for designing, and I can answer that question, but I'd like to pass the question to Ishara. You can answer that question on the chat box. And I know, Vincent, you said that you've used technology in designing. I'll give you a minute to help us have a better insight of how do you use technology in designing.
Yes, I use the design software, that is Adobe Photoshop. I use InDesign and Illustrator. These applications, they help you come up with quality designs, whereby we employ only illustrators, because if we feel that when you try to connect emotionally with AI generated images and cover designs, there is that element of connectivity from a human perspective. So we employ them for cover designs. Also, book layout and design. It is okay to design using Microsoft Word, but the quality of the finished product which is going to come out is not going to be as clean as when you use Illustrator, not Illustrator but InDesign, because you have more control than in Word. So that is how we employ technology in designing.
Okay, there are many other ways you could also be able to do that. Thank you, Vincent. You can be able to also use I think it was Diana who said, or Angelo, you can actually use it also to do. You can use.
Hello?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you very much, Vincent. I know that's one way to use technology to do illustrations, and you could also go as far as use Illustrator, for example, to develop, let's say, a cover design, as we'll see in, I think, in the next workshop, which will be dwelling more on book covers and marketing. And you could also be able to use there's something called Canva. I don't know if you mentioned that, Vincent, and many other tools. And I can see someone Diana has requested, Vincent, that you share the tools. Maybe you could actually share them in the group so that even after the call, the rest of us are able to access. One last bit of how you can share technology or use technology is, of course, you've done your launch. You need to keep marketing. You need to keep building your brand. So you could use technology you could use Facebook, for example, to tell people, hey, my book is out. You could actually use Xania as part of technology. You could actually post your book on Xania. So that is part of technology. Of course, it expands. You could use email to tell people that you've released your book or you're doing a launch. All those are parts or different roles that technology plays in terms of your journey as an author. I can see there are a number of others coming in, and so that, I think, marks the end of our presentation this evening. I hope we've been able to learn. I'd love to get feedback from you before we proceed. We have 5 minutes to finish up, 4 minutes. I'd love to know your feedback on what has been helpful to you, and in case you have any questions, feel free to ask them here in the group, and we'll be able to continue the conversation until next week. Anybody who has feedback and a question? Okay, so I'll see you again in week 3, same place, same time, and like we said, on the 23rd of March, that is on a Saturday, at 2 p.m. we'll invite you for a meet and greet at Alliance Francaise. We'll have this discussion. We'll discuss all these aspects that we've been covering for these 5 weeks. We'll have more panelists come in. We'll ask questions. We'll have lawyers, designers, and we'll be able to bring up those aspects. We'll also be able to talk about the legal factors that come into book writing, that is copywriting, and all those questions that you have will be answered. I appreciate the pleasure of your time, and do have a good evening.